in this very important conversation we're planning on having today. So, as you join us, if you could put in the chat what's your name and where you're connecting with us from, that'd be great to get a sense of who is listening and who's in the audience. Also, inviting everyone to mute yourselves if you are not speaking, and let's see. We were going to have some inspiring music for a minute or two. I was thinking that this is such a juicy conversation that maybe we should just jump right in and make sure that we have enough time to cover all that we want to cover with our conversation today. So remember to write your name and where you're connecting with us from in the chat box. That would be really nice and helpful. So, since we are skipping the music time, do we want to give a couple more minutes for people to join in and then put the music on? Or do we want to just move on to the icebreaker?
I'd really like to
give an
hear
announcement for the interpretation feature.
Am I in the wrong word? You really would like to hear what is that, Salome? Sorry.
I was just going to say that I responding to your question. I'd if it's possible to shift over to the interpretation, the Zoom etiquette, and then going over the agenda, if possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, once again, for those of you who have joined us since I said this last time, welcome to the Community Roundtable, a very, very important topic, the gender affirming care. We are going to have a juicy conversation today. So, if I can have the next slide, please. Thank you. So I'm not sure who we have joining us who is using the Spanish and English channel, but I'm so glad that we have support for that. So when you go into your Zoom at the very bottom, there is some sort of a strip that has different options on there, and you should be able to see a little world sign, like a planet sign, and it will show you when you click on that, it will show you the option of English or Spanish, and then it's important that after that you also mute original sound. That way you won't be having both the English and Spanish going on, which is how my brain feels sometimes, but that is not conducive to participating in the conversation we have planned. Next slide, please. So it's important for all of us, including the ones that are listening on the English channel, that you also go into that little world planet thing, click on that, and choose the English channel. Otherwise, it doesn't work the way that we need it to work. So it's important that we all choose the channel. Any questions? Anybody having any trouble with the Zoom translator interpreter service? Okay, please let us know. You can put something on the chat, or you can just unmute yourself. Oh, do we know if it does or doesn't? I have never used it on the phone. So for you, Stacey, I hope I'm saying your name right. Are you hearing both languages or just the English one? Just English. Okay, so that works out. Thank you for letting us know. I did not know that the phone option doesn't have the little choice there. So next slide, please. So, as any other meeting, and by now, after 2 years of the pandemic, you probably could recite all this by heart. But just as a reminder, we're here creating a safer and brave space to have these conversations. So it's important that we show up on time, that we limit the distractions so you can get the best out of the presentation, to mute yourself when you're not talking, and use the chat option when you need to speak clearly and show respect. And just a reminder for those of us who are using the English language to communicate today, that when we speak, it's important that we remember that we have interpreters that are doing a very hard job of trying to catch up with the interpretation of what we're saying. So a reminder to speak slowly and clearly. Next slide, please. So for today, our hope is that we be able to accomplish all these items here on the roadmap. Opening, we did that, and the welcome, and in a minute or so, we'll do line acknowledgement. And then we're going to talk about the Mental Health Matters program, and we'll have some community agreements. And then we have a really powerful presentation. And after that, then we'll make sure to have time for questions, but feel free to do that when and if you want to on the chat. Next slide, please. Okay. So let's do invite Annika to share the land acknowledgement.
Hi everyone, my name's Annika, and I just wanted to take a second to do our land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that we are standing in the territory and in the waters of the Salish Coast people. As uninvited guests, we are operating in the lands bordering the waters shared by all tribes belonging to the Squamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. We also recognize that many enslaved and contracted people were forced to dedicate their work to the construction of what we now know as Seattle and its surrounding areas. For these people and their descendants, we recognize their indelible mark and the space in which we will gather for this event. Finally, we would like to recognize that this land is colonized indigenous territory, and this has been designated through slaves and hired laborers. It is our collective responsibility to critically interrogate the stories and the later lives of these events, and to honor, protect, and sustain this land. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annika. Next slide, please. So let's see here. Before we move into this slide, I just wanted to remind everyone that this effort, it's not just for the speaker today, but also a team that works really hard to create this kind of spaces. So I wanted to take just a minute or two to introduce our members of our team that make this possible, even when some of us decide to hop off to another country altogether and leave them stuck with all the work. So Salome, please, if you want to start and then pass it on to somebody else.
Yes, the order that we're gonna go in, if everyone's okay with that, is myself, then Jody, Sandra, Noemi, Anika, Anna. So my name is Salome. I am on the Mental Health Matters team. I am the program coordinator in supporting all the wonderful, bringing all these wonderful events to the community. Next up is Jody.
Sorry, I had to take myself off mute. Hi, everyone. I'm Jody Early. I'm the co-director of Mental Health Matters and also a professor in the School of Nursing and Health Studies at UW-Bothell. And
Next up is Noemi and then Anika.
My name is Noemi Rivera, and I am the lead peer navigator for Mental Health Matters.
Hi, I'm Annika, and I am the research and program intern.
Next up is Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna Thompson. I am an instructional designer and technical coordinator, or not coordinator, but advisor for the site.
And I think that's it. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sandra Huber, and I am. These are my bosses, so I work for them, and they do an amazing job. The agency I work for funded this program in collaboration with UW, and that's who I am. So next slide, please. So this is a time to talk a little bit about who we are and how this series of roundtables throughout the year came about, because we believed that mental health is health, and we believe that it should be culturally and appropriately designed for all different communities. We have put this program together, Mental Health Matters, and our intentions are that people improve their understanding and their attitudes about the role, about mental health and mental illness, and that we can remove some of the stigma that exists in many communities around mental health, and to connect individuals that have been impacted by mental illness to the resources and the care they need to thrive, and not just a phone number, not just a piece of paper, but truly supporting them in developing their relationships that will keep them healthy and successful. So that is who we are. Partnership between University of Washington, Verdant, and a number of other community members that are making a lot of this possible. Next slide. So this is a summary of what we're all about from the actual technical aspect of it. And even though our roundtables are a big and important part of the goals of this program, that's only one of four different ways in which we are wanting to reach out to community through the piece on mental health education, and we're supporting that by offering trainings to individuals that are interested. Our first cohort started in March, and the beginning of March, and will be ending here in a couple of weeks, and they get the opportunity to get a wider range of information that they can tailor to the services or the support they want to offer to the members of their community. Number two is the community roundtable that you are being a part of today. And the third one is community events, in which we partner with other agencies and community leaders and community members to make sure that we find different ways to tackle mental health, if I may use that word, because not everything can be solved individually and isolated, and bringing people together. It's another way that many of our communities heal and move forward. And the outreach and navigation, one thing that we keep on hearing time and time again is that access is one thing, but if you don't have the resources to access the access, then it doesn't really help. So our whole program goal is to, through these four main components, remove some of the stigma and have a more open conversation, as well as services that are tailored specifically to communities as they see it fit. Next slide, please. For those of you who are not familiar with the too much of this peer mental health navigator, it's another opportunity for people to be trained so they can work within the scope of practice when they go out to communities, whether it's their families, whether it's their churches or different places, and can help us in supporting more and more of us feeling comfortable having this conversation. So if you're interested, you are encouraged to write to us via email. And as you can see on the display, the winter cohort is, we had to update the dates, but it will be ending here in a couple weeks. And that was for English. And now the spring cohort that is starting, I think, in May, it will be for Spanish speakers. So if you're a Spanish speaker, it's a great opportunity to get this training. And the winter one ends on April 10th, and the Spanish cohort begins in the middle of May. So if you're interested or have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, or you can go to our website, and the link is above in the chat. Next slide, please. Once again, a reminder, I have to do that. I'm from Panama and we don't know how to speak slow. But despacio, like the song Despacito, remember to slow down. And I want to invite our guest speaker to be mindful, because I'm sure there's so much and people are going to want to have an opportunity to hear it all. But let's remember that we have two human beings trying to keep up with this conversation. So thank you. Next slide, please. These are our community agreements, and if you participated in any sorry, I got distracted with the chat. Lola, hey Lola, can I do a Spanish? I think that Salome probably could answer that. I think that it will depend, and correct me if I'm wrong, it would depend on availability. So we could consider we're trying to be mindful of people being interested in the English or the Spanish, and to create space, especially for Spanish or other languages, because those are harder to come by. So I don't know, Salome, do you have any thoughts about that?
I don't see the question or the statement in the chat box. I see Jody, what she shared regarding the Peer Mental Health Navigator training.
Oh, I see. Well, somebody wanted to know if they could do the Spanish training also, or just the English.
If they're already enrolled in the English training, we're only providing the English training to them at this time. If they had enrolled in the Spanish, then they would have been able to receive just the Spanish, but we're requesting people to stay in only one of the cohorts, only because we want to be able to provide those services to others in the community.
Yeah, and another important thing is that we want to be true to our commitment of offering a small stipend of $250 for the participants. So that also dictates how many people we can even have, even if if we could do it, the financial part of it probably will be limiting. So, but thank you for asking, and I really appreciate that you've enjoyed it so much that you would be interested in doing it in Spanish too. All right, going back to our agreement, I think that if you participated in any other training, you know these are the basic common courtesies that we are expected to share with each other, including be respectful, respect the dignity and humanity of others. The space is a space for learning. That's all we're all doing. And it's important that we look for intentional learning, not perfection. Even if you have to ask a question a couple different times, it's okay, because at the end of the day, what's important is that we walk away with what we need out of this conversation. I know rarely in the English speaking community we worry too much about allowing one person to speak at a time. In other cultures like mine, or at least my family culture, that was not always a rule that was followed. So just remember to allow one person to speak at a time, and your point of view, what you bring to the table, is important. So so ask questions, affirm things that are making sense to you on the chat. Also allow others to talk if you usually talk a lot, and the same the other way around. You know, if you never feel comfortable asking a question or talking, you know, challenge yourself to give it a try. And at the end of the day, the most important thing is that laughter and joy are healing. And this is an important topic, but there's also a lot of joy in learning about it. So I hope that you can keep that in mind. Next slide, please. So tonight's presenter is Aleks Martin, and they hold a Master of Social Work degree from the University of Washington with an integrated mental health concentration. She has been in the field of health education, community organizing, and social activism for over 20 years. Topics of interest they offer are in the areas of LGBTQ cultural competency, with emphasis on health disparities, racial equity, social justice, and cultural humility. Transgender and gender diversity, behavioral health, integrated health, mental health, substance use, with particular interest in harm reduction and safety training, safe space for all, a modified crisis prevention intervention with focus on de-escalation techniques and motivational interviewing skills, including HIV, AIDS, HEP, STI, health education, and safer sex practices. So that is a mouthful. So let me say that we are very, very grateful and honored to have Aleks with us today. And I definitely am excited to hear what is going to be shown tonight. So take it away, Aleks.
Thank you so much, Sandra. And in my native tongue of the Philippines, salamat po. I'm going to share screen right now, and we will move along. And while I'm doing that, I want to give a special shout out to my colleague, Salome. Thank you so much for inviting me into your space. It's really an honor. While this is loading. All right. Again, mabuhay. Thank you to the wonderful folks at Mental Health Matters for having me and creating this time with all of us, all of you out there. A moment for learning, strengthening our minds, expanding our hearts for compassion and passion in our respective communities, but especially with each other and for each other as fellow professionals in the helping field. I was looking at the chat box and I saw some folks all the way from Linwood, Bothell, and Sultan. And I know there's more folks, and I see Salome's little baby. Hi, sorry, I get distracted easily. I've got a few godchildren of my own, so babies are my soft spot. Sorry about that. But again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in this wonderful world that we share, and good day, everyone. Again, my name is Aleks Martin. I primarily use she or they pronouns, but I will respond to all pronouns, and he and they are totally okay. I am honored to share safe space, including this virtual space, with all of you. And as we begin our time together, I acknowledge that I am on the traditional land of the Coast Salish peoples, the First Peoples of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. And I humbly ask permission as a Philippine ex-immigrant from the Philippines to be part of its history, and hopefully its own storytelling. And I invite all of you, as we have already have at the beginning, wherever you may be, to honor the land that you are on, its people, past and present, the land that you and your family and community have come to settle on and make a home. I also wanted to thank you so much for that intro. So again, I'm a licensed social worker with a concentration in integrated health and mental health from the University of Washington, and a licensed substance use disorder professional in the state of Washington. I would like to also share that much of my work is centered on health disparities that impact marginalized groups while embracing harm reduction and acknowledging implicit bias. As a proud genderqueer and immigrant from the Philippines, I intend to share my professional and personal experiences with the hope of bringing diverse perspectives into an often cisgender, heteronormative, white, and male-dominated world, be it at work or society at large. And as we begin to distinguish diversity and difference, think about how much of your own experiences, particularly how the personal histories manifest themselves in the professional and in the social influences that we experience. For example, begin to think about, and of course you already have, but as we spend this time together, think about your identity as men, as women, cisgender, transgender, white, black, brown, US born, immigrant, what neighborhood you grew up in, or where you live now, your degrees, the schools you attended, whether your desk or your cubicle, if you are slowly returning to the office, whether it's situated, where it's situated compared to your peers and even to management, or wherever your private office might be located, or the neighborhood of the community you intend to serve, so on and so forth. And just a little glimpse of my background again, if you're interested, but I'll just quickly glance over this. And all right. Now, if you've been with me at previous webinars and all that jazz, then you'll know I usually will guide us in a short activity to normalize incorporating mindfulness. Quick check. Can you all hear that soft music in the background? Maybe a thumbs up. Thank you very much for the nod. As a self-care practice into events such as this webinar, including therapeutic time with our clients, and hopefully even in staff meetings, I would personally be so delighted if you're able to add this into your personal routine. Even just a few minutes can do wonders. This mindfulness activity is designed to assist in exploring our experiences in the present moment. I can only imagine at the end of the day where folks are in their spirit, in their bodies, in their minds, in their hearts. So I'd like to invite you to focus on quieting the mind while deepening awareness of the mind, body, and spirit connection. Please remember, this is just a snippet, and I encourage you to take your time as much as you are able to beyond our short time together. So let us begin. Before you enter into this mindfulness practice, please find yourself in a comfortable seated position perhaps a standing position against the wall. Place both feet on the floor and gently move your body to increase your comfort. Once you find that sweet, sweet spot, take a deep breath and a long but relaxed exhale with eyes closed or a soft gaze. Allow gravity to pull the body towards the ground. And take another deep breath with me. And a soft exhale. As you become one in this moment. Inhale in. Soft exhale out. Should you feel sensations, let them be, let them go. Be one with your body. It has served you well. It has protected your mind, your heart, and your spirit. Give it gratitude by simply being where you are right now, the here and the now, and nowhere else but here and now. There is nothing to do but inhale in and a soft exhale. Now gently move your palms, hands, and fingers towards your head. Now imagine holding a crown befitting your majestic self, and remember that you are royalty. Now slowly shift your arms above you, stretch it as much as you can towards the sky, a sky unlimited in potential and endless in possibilities, just like you. A gentle inhale in and a soft exhale. We complete this very short and sweet practice. Gently open your eyes and begin to reconnect with your environment, our shared environment. And as you do, slowly take notice of discoveries, memories, images, voices, sensations, thoughts, feelings that bring joy, that bring peace, that bring enlightenment, perhaps a smile, and promise me that you'll remember them. And a final gentle inhale and a soft exhale. And in a few moments, let's come back together. Uno, dos, tres. Salamat po. Gracias. Thank you. Okay. So, thank you very much for joining me. And if you didn't, that's okay. I hope you took advantage of the quiet, the silence. It's okay if you muted me. That's quite all right. We all come from different backgrounds. We all come from different experiences. As the kids say these days, you do you, boo. Our learning objectives for today is not to memorize the winners of all of RuPaul's Drag Race seasons, but to explore the resilience of the diversity and complex LGBTQIA+2 communities. You'll notice I will be saying different acronyms. They keep changing. I can't even keep up myself. Understand the impact of multiple minority stress and trauma of QTBIPOC folks, queer, trans, bi, intersex, people of color folks. And hopefully to increase our capacity towards affirming knowledge and compassionate skills. And I do include myself in this. I learn as much as you learn from each other and with each other. All right. Oh, where did that one go? Hold on. Something went missing. My apologies. Oh, there it is. I went too fast. There it is. I'm so glad I caught it. All right. I generally start with this opening slide. As you can see, there's a bunch of people in here. And now feel free to turn on your microphones. I want to hear folks. And then if you're the shy type like I am, feel free to put it in the chat box. However, when I'm on screen share, I seem to get blind and don't see the chat box. So if anyone wants to volunteer and read off some of the responses in the chat box, I welcome those. But I'm curious if you know any of these folks. You can feel free to just jump in. We have an intimate group. I don't think we'll be talking over each other. So I'm quite confident we'll be sharing space quite lovingly.
All of them, every single one of them.
All right. Well, Sandra, don't be the A+++ student. Give me just one for now. We'll share the love. We'll share the love, Sandra.
Oh, I love my girl crush is Rachel Maddow.
Oh, okay. Okay. Now, who is Rachel Maddow?
She is TV. She does a show on MSNBC.
That is correct.
Yeah. Oh, I know my girl. I know my girl.
One quick one. You said you knew everybody. Can you name someone who you think people might know the least?
Where is Time Magazine? I won't say gender or anything. I think probably.
Oh, which one?
Time Magazine, the black individual on the Time Magazine. I've watched every movie they have ever made.
We'll give it to someone else.
Okay.
We'll give it to someone else. I'm seeing some smiles. Maybe Anika knows. I saw you smiling. I think you might know who this person is.
I definitely know who she is. Sorry, I'm afraid I don't remember their pronouns, but I don't know their name. I was kind of taking a giggle.
That's all right. That's all right. This is part of the exercise. Who else? Who might know this? Who wants to steal this one?
I just know one person in all those images. I feel terrible.
Luisa, who is it?
Ellen.
Ellen DeGeneres. All right, wonderful. Thank you. Anyone else?
The person on the other Time Magazine cover is Laverne Cox. She uses she, her pronouns.
Thank you. Who's that one speaking? Let me see if I can.
My name is Case.
Case, thank you, Case. So Laverne Cox on the other cover of Time Magazine. All right. Who else? Who else knows the people in here?
Oh, I know Caitlyn Jenner.
Caitlyn Jenner. All right. On the cover of Vanity Fair. All right. Very good. Who was that one speaking? I'm trying to catch everyone in a college phone.
Noemi.
Thank you so much. Anyone else?
There's Hilary Swank on the left-hand side. This is Salome.
Salome, that is correct. That is Hilary Swank, who won an Oscar for it.
Mm-hmm.
And she is from Bellingham, Washington.
Oh, a local?
Yeah, if folks didn't know that, she's a local girl who's gone international, clearly. Anyone else? Going once, and I can't check the chat box. Okay, I can see the chat box now. All right, going once, twice. All right. Quick observations. Why do you think folks had trouble remembering or knowing any of the names, except for the ones that were named? And there was just less than a handful. Any observations? What observations did you have?
I remember seeing their faces, but for me, I just get inundated by all this media public figures that I have a hard time remembering everyone. And that's horrible, but it's gotten to the point where now I just try to avoid magazines and watching too much TV because
Yeah.
it's just a lot.
That's part of popular media. Absolutely. I agree with that.
And
Anyone else?
Alex, I knew more. We just focused on the one that you asked me if people would be less likely to know, but I do, and again, maybe my daughter identifies as bi, so I don't get even a little bit of slack, and I need to know all this stuff. So so I recognize quite a few very talented people on that screen.
Why do you think you might know all of these folks that are pictured here in this one small slide?
Because it's important to me to know
Why is it important to you?
Because as an immigrant, Black Latina woman, I know what it's like to not be front and center. So it's important for me that I do that for me, for my daughter, for my community, and that it's part of, the discrimination and persecution that happens in our community. So they're my brothers and sisters in the fight.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And part of our conversation today is recognize how diversity truly manifests in day-to-day lives, in our lives, be it not just in the professional world, but really in the personal. And it's no judgment on anyone knowing or not knowing who these people are, but the value of it and the essence of it is, why is it important to us? Right? That's really the question. Why would it be important to us? And Sandra shared a little bit of why that's important to her, right? All right. So for the sake of taking this opportunity then to educate folks and to share this information, I'll just go from one side to the other. I'll start with the Time cover magazine here of Ellen DeGeneres. This was her coming out. She had a short a TV series called Ellen. And in it, she actually came out as lesbian in one of the scenes. And shortly thereafter, she was put on the cover of Time magazine and she was outed that way, with consent, of course. However, if folks didn't realize this, it ruined her career. She was blacklisted for quite some time until she reincarnated her career. And now she is one of the most successful, celebrities out there, right? With her talk show host, or her talk show, apologize. And then we've got Hilary Swank playing the role in this movie adaptation of a real life story of Brandon Tina, who was born Tina Brandon, a trans man. And it was called Boys Don't Cry. Now, she actually received critical acclaim for this role and won herself an Oscar for this. But remember that she is a self-identified cisgender woman playing a trans man. All right, moving right along, we have got on the cover of Out magazine, RuPaul, who was made famous really before RuPaul's Drag Race fame. She was quite popular in the music scene and in movies and TV as well. But she really didn't get to push herself out until in the last 10 years with her RuPaul's Drag Race competition. And then we've got Janet Mock, on the cover of one of her books, Redefining Realness. She is an out trans woman of color, Black woman, who is also an MSNBC correspondent, opposite of Rachel Maddow, who is also an MSNBC, but who has her own show, right, on the cover of Rolling Stone. And then right underneath the ampersand symbol is Margaret Cho. Margaret Cho is a Korean-American comedian who is unapologetically bisexual in her self-identity. And she also had a short stint, a TV series called The All-American Girl. Now I'll ask you, and you don't have to answer right this second. When I say All-American Girl, do we all think of a Korean-American? Right? And then on the cover of Vanity Fair is Caitlyn Jenner. And then on the cover of Time magazine is Laverne Cox. Now I noticed people hesitating about her identity as a trans Black woman. She is one of the most intelligent speakers that I've ever heard. And if you're ever lucky, go see her through the UW Systems speaking engagement series. Quite incredible. In one of her last speaking engagements, which was titled, Ain't I a Woman Yet? which really just speaks to what we as a society, we stifle ourselves and we kind of censor ourselves, right? Ain't I a woman? And she is the star of The Orange is the New Black, and she is an out trans actress playing a trans character. In contrast to Hilary Swank playing a trans man. Why do I make this comparison? Because, and even if people argued that isn't that what acting is? Sure. But when we continue to perpetuate that cisgender actors play all the parts, then there will be no room for trans and non-binary and gender diverse actors to play the other roles, because then it takes up space, right? And then this where you see Pose. Pose is a TV series produced by Ryan Murphy, and Pose is an homage to the documentary Paris is Burning. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you, I invite you to watch that documentary where Pose is fashioned after. And in Pose, the majority of the characters are trans characters, played by, big surprise, trans actors. And this is historic, because up until the last few years, all these roles were given to cisgender people, cisgender actors. And if there were ever any trans actors in the history of filmmaking, if we're talking about decades and generations ago, it is very well likely that they were in the closet. To the far right is Gina Rosero, a successful model, Filipino-American model based out of New York. And this is an image from her TED Talk. It is the most viewed TED Talk in its series, in its collection. And this is where she came out as a trans woman. Below her is Isis King, who was actually outed in Tyra Banks' America's Next Top Model. She was featured in this all cisgender supermodel, female supermodel contest as a trans woman. And this was during her pre-surgery time. And when I watch and review the old clips, I just cringe at how transphobic some of the contestants were and some of the dialogue that ensued. But she is now an outspoken speaker herself. She is a successful model, and she continues to model on print and on the runway. And there's Anderson Cooper, CNN news anchor. He is the son of multi-millionaire Gloria Vanderbilt. He is also an out man. He's very open about his identity. And then there's Kate Jennings, or Call Me Kat. She is believed to be the youngest trans girl to be featured in a reality TV. And I wanted to bring our attention to two local folks. In the black and white photo is Cal Anderson. Cal Anderson has since passed on, but Cal Anderson is the first openly gay politician in the state of Washington. There's a park named after him on Capitol Hill in Seattle. And then next to him, to his right, is Justice Mary Yu. She is the highest ranking Asian Latina Supreme Court Justice who is also lesbian. Now you know all of these folks. Now, I tried to make this as diverse as possible. Obviously, this is not what the entire LGBTQ community looks like. I did try to put some history. I tried to add some diversity, and also hopefully spark some dialogue why some people only remember certain people, right? Although, for example, and this, you can argue that this is a personal opinion, and it really is, but for example, with Caitlyn on the cover of Vanity Fair, yes, kudos to her courage for coming out after being such a prolific Olympian before her transition. But what this does is it creates a narrative that it's so easy for trans women in particular to transition. Remember her access. Remember her economic stature. She has access to resources that many in the trans community, particularly trans women community, and people of color, particularly trans Black women, do not have access to. And that is why it's difficult and challenging to access resources for transitioning. In her short-lived reality TV show, she was quoted in there, I'm paraphrasing, she just couldn't understand why the Black trans women weren't just getting jobs. And I'll leave it at that. And hopefully we'll get more into a deeper discussion. All right, we move along. All right, now I'm curious how folks are coming in today. I'm going to break us out into breakout rooms and have small group discussions for like 10 minutes or so, or 5 to 10 minutes. And I would like for you to think about these items. Now, you can skip some of them. You can definitely add to them, especially if you have time and if you're going fast. But I would at least start with your names. And what I would like for you to do is think about your name and whatever you're comfortable with, preferred name, legal name, maybe you have a stage name, right? Your pronouns, and really think about that. And we'll have discussion about why, as your presenter feels that this might be important, not just in personal social discussions, but in the workplace. And your race and ethnicity, and then your gender, and what and how you may identify. So here are the rules, and I'll share this real quick in here. And if someone, could I get someone from Mental Health Matters to just put in the chat box name, pronoun, race/ethnicity, and gender as a cue for when we all go into our breakout rooms. And when we go into our breakout rooms, you still have access to the chat box, so you'll still see this as the prompt. And then followed with this, go. So in the group breakout rooms, I'm going to divide the rooms into groups of 3 randomly. So if you don't know anyone, this is even great. Here are the 3 roles that you will all portray. The observer. So the observer can either just kind of memorize what they're observing or write things down, right? So observe. Do not interrupt the conversation, which I'm about to describe. Try not to interrupt, try not to intervene, right? We'll have discussion over this. And then the speaker. The role of the speaker is to, and it might get uncomfortable here, and we will have discussion over this, is to tell the listener how they think they might identify. Now, for the purpose of getting to know each other, just share your names in that moment for that first introduction in your breakout rooms. Just share your names. But the rest of the time, the speaker will look at the other person, the listener, and assume, and I did say assume, based on what they see, their perspective, their perception of the other person's pronouns, race and/or ethnicity, and gender. Now, I want to be respectful of trauma. I want to be respectful of triggers. You can take turns, you can discuss that. And I'm really also open to just having your own conversation about how I'm even explaining this. But if you're able to, this will be great. And when we all come back together, we will have a discussion of why we felt what we felt. All right? Questions, anyone? In the chat box or live, feel free to unmute yourselves if you have any clarifying questions or any comments that you may want to share right now before I break you all up into groups of 3. Going once, twice. And thank you, Salome, for putting it in the chat box. All right, I'll take that as a we can move forward. All right, breakout rooms. Breakout rooms. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. So again, thank you for playing with me as observer, speaker, and listener. I did notice one of the rooms only had 2 folks, so I joined in as an observer. I kind of snuck in there quietly, and that was good. All right. For now, general comments from folks. I heard one that was good. Any other comments? Just general comments of how that was like. And I'll check the chat box as well. Anyone? All right.
Sorry. It was generally pretty interesting being able to like get to know someone else, but it was also a bit stressful, worrying whether or not we would accidentally, like, not necessarily offend, but like accidentally calling like the person without their preferred pronouns or misgendering and the race as well.
Yeah. That was part of it. Yeah. Thank you for calling it out. Anyone else? Thank you, Jenny. All right. So here are prompts for discussions and observations. Observers, I want to hear from you. Observers, what did you hear? Observers, what did you hear? And I know it's open-ended, so there's really no right or wrong answer here.
Pauses.
Who are the observers? Oh, go ahead.
Pauses, silence. A lot of unsureness.
Unsureness. Anyone else? From another observer, what did you see? I'd like to hear from another observer. What did you see?
Shifting in a chair.
Shifting in the chair.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. The body language, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? All right. Still with the observers. Now, how did you feel? How did that feel for you? Listening in. Did it feel good? Did it feel not so good? How did it feel?
Tense.
And thank you. Thank you. For the speakers, what did you say? In general terms, what did you say? What did you focus on based on those prompts? Or what you didn't? Did you disobey the prompts? Again, there are no right or wrong answers here. Vincent? Yeah, go ahead.
I mostly disobeyed the prompt because
tell me more. Yeah.
I genuinely didn't know what to say. I was just kind of like, I was just telling her that I'm not very educated enough in this topic. So I just kind of like, just my general viewpoint of what I thought it was. And Lola just listened to me, and I'm just kind of like, we took turns. She was the speaker at one point, and then I was the speaker at one point, and then we both swapped, like listener, and speaker. But I thought it was very interesting. Yeah, there was some similarities as well, so I think it was.
Okay. I might come back to you as the listener then. Now, another speaker, how did it make you feel to assume the identity of the person in front of you?
I did the speaker with Jenny, and I felt pressured to get it right, to not misidentify and offend.
So you're cautious. You felt like you were tippy-toeing. Thank you. Now, listeners, how did it make you feel? Particularly for those who didn't get a chance to actually swap. Now, some of you, I gave that open sort of rule at the end, like if you had time, go ahead, do whatever feels right for you, or if you wanted to kind of modify the prompts. But for the listeners, particular show of hands, which listeners only listened and didn't swap roles and just didn't have any opportunity to speak up at all? Anyone? In those 5 minutes, it was a pretty tight 5 minutes. It went by really fast. So no listeners were able to just listen. You all were able to swap back, it sounds like. But when you were first just listening in that role, how did it make you feel?
like not judged, but cataloged, maybe.
Cataloged. Tell me more about that.
I mean, in my case, it's kind of predictable since first I put my pronouns next to my name. So that was kind of easy. And then secondly, well, my name it's a name that it's Spanish. So it's kind of, and then my accent when, because we say hi when we enter. So that's something that it was kind of given. The thing that was left was my identity. And that's something that, well, that's the thing that my speaker guessed, or I mean, she, based on what she saw in 3 minutes, right, in an image from me, she decided to catalog me as a woman, identified as a woman.
Thank you, Luisa. I really appreciate what you said about feeling cataloged. Thank you for that. Anyone else?
One thing that I felt when I was the listener was like, during the pause moments, it was like, oh gosh, am I really that hard to categorize or so, or like pinpoint what I may identify as? Because for, you know, when you think of yourself, you're like, oh, well, that's what I am. Like I identify as a woman. You know, my ethnicity, I think it's so inherent to me. Sometimes it kind of made me feel like, oh gosh, like, am I not meeting the standards of what society classifies as the things that I identify?
Thank you for that, Anika. Thank you. If you notice, the number of questions or prompts for discussion between observer, speaker, and listener dwindles down. As the observer, you have more choices, right? You get to observe more. You get to hear and see and feel. As the speaker, you get to say things. You don't have to listen necessarily, right? Particularly because I gave you the prompt that the listeners just listens, right? But you still have the power to feel. But when you're just the listener, you're kind of left with just, how did it make you feel? As the listener, you become the object. As the speaker, you create the subject. And the observer, that's society. This is how we create social constructs. And it was quite beautiful for me as the listener at the moment, hearing your observations, your experiences, the words that you chose, standards, categorized, catalog, predictable, the social cues, those were so powerful for me to hear. And it's really telling of how society kind of inherently, and I heard this, teaches us, right? That shouldn't it be obvious what I look like to some people, right? But the fact is, that is true, it is not. And the more we truly connect with identities, with our backgrounds, with our histories, with our narratives, with our stories, both as communities and as individuals, we recognize that these preset notions are implicitly biased. And we'll keep coming back to that theory, okay? All right. All right. It's just a moment of reflection of how that was like. Just a moment of silence with a deep breath in and a soft exhale. Thank you, everyone. All right. Warning. Now, some of these forthcoming images, folks might find, in the language, might find explicit, but just note, this is for educational purposes, and we'll go through them now. Now, if you were to say Google image search the word lesbian, what might you think will pop up on a Google image search? Go ahead and say it out loud. You can unmute yourselves.
Well, first of all, it has a filter. That's important.
Sure. It could, if it does have a filter, it does. Yeah. Depending on your filter, what might show up on a Google image search? Are you saying it may not show up anything because of the filter?
No. I'm saying because if I have kids, and so our Google in the family computer has a filter for, because if I search for lesbian, probably we might see a sexual scene of two women. And I'm pretty sure that if I have the filter, it's going to be censored. If I have an open Google search, I will probably see that among other images of women engaging with each other, not necessarily sexually, but you know what I mean? That will be a good point.
Sensual, sure. And what would be the filtered version? What would that look like if it wasn't sexual? What would it look like?
Probably two women hugging or something, I guess.
Hugging. All right, thank you. Other folks?
One thing that I think would probably pop up, which is a stereotype, would be a woman with like shorter hair or
Yeah. So yeah, images of feminine women intimately together, right? Oops. There's some intimacy here, right? Sexual in nature, kissing. There's some contrast of femininity versus masculinity, but definitely at least two. And there's romance, intimacy, sexual in nature, kissing, like touching, right? How about if you searched gay? What might you see in a Google image search? Just blurt out one word responses. What might you see if you did a Google image search, filtered or not filtered?
I guess the same thing. It's like as if gay people were just involved in that.
Yes. Sex, that's it. That's all that gay people do is have sex.
Yeah, and I hate that.
Anyone else?
I would see, I feel like for the images for gay men, they could be holding hands. It wouldn't have to be as intimate as it would be for women.
Thank you.
And I would be likely to see two buff guys with no shirt and jeans and really, really close. I don't know why.
Well, here's the thing. If you haven't been doing it yet, you could do a live Google image search now, just on your own computers if you're able to, whatever your filter settings are. I'd be curious. Now, remember, I did this on my own, and which is funny because it showed a picture of Kelly Clarkson, the first winner of American Idol. I don't know why. But here is what it would show. You're absolutely right with that one comment. All of a sudden, they become naked, practically naked, right? Buff, but also notice how white and pale they are. Now, the truth is, gay people look all different. But this is the stereotype. Much like in the lesbian image search, they were also pretty pale, right? What about bisexual? What images might you think will show if you did a Google image search? And feel free to use, if you felt comfortable, using your own computers to do a search and tell me what you see. Other folks who haven't spoken up?
Pictures of pride flags.
Pride flags. Is that what you saw? You're thinking that it might be that?
Yeah, that's also what I thought. If you just search gay without the man, it comes up with mostly flags.
Gotcha. You're actually quite on point on this one. Is it Case or Casey?
It's Case.
Case. Would you believe that all of a sudden when you put bisexual or search for bisexual, it just becomes images of pink and blue banners? Here's what's sad about this is that all of a sudden bisexual people are no longer human. They're just symbols now. And they often, what's the dialogue in the larger LGBTQ community is that bisexual people aren't seen. Often the comments that you might hear within the LGBTQ community, or even perhaps in mainstream community, is that you're just confused. Pick a camp. You're either gay or straight. That kind of commentary.
You just want to have it all, you know.
Or that, or the opposite, like you just want to have it all. Absolutely. And that's problematic. Now, what might you think will show up if you Google searched transgender, or an image search, whether it's Bing or Google or Safari? What might show up if you searched transgender?
There are a lot of different faces. They are not necessarily naked or engaged in sexual. Yeah.
So in contrast, you think that if you search transgender, it'll be less sexual?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So this one, often they show victims of trans hate crimes, images of Laverne Cox, Caitlyn Jenner, and sometimes, or if not often, masculine looking men with wigs. A lot of before and after images, right? Very sort of sensational, right? Very TMZ kind of energy. Now, what about queer? What might you think will pop up if you typed in queer? It becomes even more stereotypical. So what does straight look like if you did a Google image search? Well, there you have it. That's what straight people look like. Now, I am laughing with this. However, the point I'm making here is, if you had to, now granted, I didn't put straight people or heterosexual, right? But then I also did not just put gay men. I just put gay. Why weren't there images of happy, right? Because this, to me, symbolizes that if you put straight, we ought to know what straight looks like. We don't have to Google search that, because that's the mainstream, right? And that's problematic. Inhale in and exhale. All right, quick crash course on sex and gender. And if you haven't heard this, hopefully you'll remember this one. So again, biological sex, or sex assigned at birth, right, is different from sexual identity of being male or female. That is different from your gender, from one's gender identity and expression. Sex is different from gender. And I know I still hear it all the time. And I see myself sort of in between my elders and the younger generation, but I still hear a lot of confusion with this between sex and gender. Oftentimes you might hear comments like, well, obviously you're male. That's not true. Well, you have long hair, you must be female. That's also not true, right? I want you to think about the exercise that you just did earlier, where I had you paired up in threes, right? Those are assumptions. Those are the social constructs. Those are the social assumptions that have been pervasive in our culture, in the school system, in legislation, in common conversations on the street. Here's another way to distinguish this. Who you sleep with is different from who you sleep as. I'll repeat. Who you sleep with, the other person or persons that you are intimate with, not necessarily just for physical sex, attraction, intimacy. That is who you are in bed with. is different from who you are when you go to bed. Your external identity versus your internal identity. Now, I'm not suggesting that this is all just about sex, right? This is also about intimacy and attraction, right? But your attraction, whatever you do with that attraction, is different from who you are on the inside and how you express yourself on the outside. All right? Here's some toolkits that I can share with you. I'll share with you two. I'll start with this one. This one is called the genderbread person. I'm just going to do it chronologically. There have been various versions of this. This was conceived by Sam Killerman, who happens to be a straight cisgender man. Yeah, and you can find this in It's Pronounced metrosexual.com. He's actually a comedian of all things. It's quite funny. And I asked permission from him to use this one. But in this one, he distinguishes gender identity with gender expression versus biological sex and sexual orientation. So identity here is how and what you think of yourself as in your brain, right? Do you see yourself as woman, genderqueer, or man? Now, this is the first version. It's evolved since. I'm just showing you the most simplest version. With gender expression, if you notice, there's this external kind of dotted line. It's your outward expression. How do you show yourself to the world? What do you see in front of the mirror? Do you present yourself feminine, androgynous, masculine? And as you can see, there's arrows, right? So it can keep going. This is just the starting point. And then there's biological sex. We have now come to, and you'll see it, there, you now may hear terms like assigned male at birth, female assigned at birth, right? And there's also intersex, which I'm happy that we're beginning to be more aware of it, and we need to do more. But biological sex is what you are born with: female genitalia, intersex genitalia, or male genitalia. And for history, there are many intersex people who were, and I'll just put it simply, their genitals were messed with by the doctors. Most of them were turned into female genitalia, when really they never had ovaries. And so they were just corrected, using air quotes here. So that's a pervasive issue in history. And then there's sexual orientation, your attraction, right? Your heart, who you love, who you care for. Heterosexual, bisexual, homosexual, and then the arrows keep going. So this is a beginning sort of first step. Now, the next toolkit that I'll show you, is the gender unicorn. Why I love this one is because it's actually made by trans and gender non-binary young people. And if you notice, there's a distinction here, which I love. I'm going to point it out real quick. There's a lot of, there's a universal theme here from the previous one. But what I enjoy about this one is that there's a starting point and then it just goes forward. Unlike the previous one where it kind of falls under the binary again, right? It's the either or kind of system. And that's what we're trying to fight, is that it's really not the binary. We just created that. And what I love about this one too is the distinction of physical attraction versus emotional attraction. And I love this one very much because I feel that it honors polyamory, right? It honors people the way people love each other. You can call it love, you can call it attraction, right? And it's what we do with it. So I really, really enjoyed this one. So it's still gender identity, right? Gender expression, sex assigned at birth, physical attraction, emotional attraction. Right. Now, can I get a volunteer who feels comfortable kind of plotting themselves on the genderbread person? Who'd like to volunteer? And while you're thinking, I'll share mine. So my gender identity, I'm genderqueer. My gender expression falls between feminine and androgynous. My biological sex is male. My sexual orientation falls under, well, homosexual in this one. But but not that far into the right. Just past the bisexual. Anyone feeling comfortable sharing theirs? Going once, twice. Is this a shy bunch? All right. How about the next one? Any volunteers on this one? Or you can do it silently. I'll leave this on for a minute. Go ahead and plot yourself where you are in your gender identity. Oh, I heard somebody just turn on their mic. Would you like to volunteer? Wonderful human? Nope. All right. And then plot yourself where you are in your gender expression. Other, masculine, feminine?
I can say.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a woman. I am between gender expression will be kind of like how I act as stereotypes that society has. Is that how it is?
No, it's how you express yourself. Yeah.
Because it's a kind of a tricky, the gender expression, and I'm confused. That's why I'm interested in learning more, because
tell me,
it might be considered that some things that I do or some ways that I am might be masculine. And I'm saying this because my experience is this one, very briefly. When I was dating my ex-husband, we were very young, and I remember that I always have been, since I was a young girl, I was very intrepid, probably that's the word, and I was kind of like what people tend to say tomboy, right? Sometimes I was the kind of girl that wanted to climb trees and play baseball with the guys and things like that. That wasn't a normal thing for a girl to do, but I like men. I mean, it's not like I was seriously, and I liked to be a woman, but there was a time in my life that I was curious about what if I was a man. And actually I remember, and this is kind of a personal thing, but I'm not ashamed of that. But I remember a couple of times when I was a young girl, using a pair of socks to feel how it will feel to have something between my legs. So I was like pretending to be, how would that feel to be a boy? But I mean, but I have always been attracted to boys or to men, but I was curious about that. And I don't feel like that made me this or that. It will depend on how people want to conceive me according to their own opinions. And to be very honest, I don't care. I mean, now I can say that. I used to do that when I was a little girl. And I remember in one time when I was early teenager that I had my best friend, girlfriend, woman, I mean, and I remember that we the very first time, and this is again another personal stuff, but I don't care because I'm a human just as everybody else. But I remember the very first time that I saw porn, it was with my best friend girl, and we both were twins or teenagers, and we were like, oh, what is this? I mean, and of course we have a bodily reaction, each of us, but that didn't mean that we were attracted to each other. It was just like it has been my life in that matter. It has been very interesting experiences that at this moment of my life, I cannot conceive why it's so important for people to catalog us or to know. I mean, I have two boys, and I always, since they were very young, I always raised them like saying, when you grow up, maybe, and you have your partner, I don't know, and they say, my girlfriend, I say, I don't know, or maybe your boyfriend, I don't know. I always had that option open because at the end of the day, it's not of my business. Whatever makes you happy and it doesn't harm me, let the world go round, right? That's my, and the same happens with when people are making the big fuss about, oh, let's say, I don't know, I have no idea. I mean, let's say Michael Jackson. Oh, Michael Jackson came out what? As a gay person. I say, so what's the big fuss about it? Did you ask him if he likes popcorn or he likes laces on his shoes or Velcro? I don't care. honestly. I don't give a nothing. But people nowadays is very interested into other people's lives and preference and ways of living. And that's the part that I cannot understand, why people are so interested in that. What's the difference if my governor, my president, my whatever teacher likes men or likes women or likes both? I mean, what's the difference? It's a human.
Part of that is, yeah, part of that is the way we've been socialized, right? And thank you, Luisa. And the thing is, people have always been interested in other people. That's just not just that nowadays. What's beautiful about this toolkit right here between the gender unicorn and the genderbread person is that this is about how you see yourself. This has nothing to do with how other people see you. If you notice, it has nothing to do with how somebody else or groups of people or individuals see you. This is all about you. This is all about your self-identity. With your gender identity, your gender expression, your sex assigned at birth, your physical attraction, your emotional attraction, etc., whatever they may be. The problem is the way we've been socialized, whether it's in the United States or any other country or culture or religion, or even our own family culture, our own family norms, right? It's always about, oh, what will the neighbors think? And we recognize that this is problematic in so many levels. And if we don't, then we don't carry that problem around, right? But when we do recognize it, that's choice, right? That's the choice that we make. And so, and to your point, Luisa, just with gender expression, it's how you express yourself. If you chose to express yourself more masculine, that doesn't make you gay. That doesn't make you a man. It just means you have masculine gender expression. For example, jeans, pants. There was a period in time where women were not allowed to wear pants, right? They were forced to wear these giant hoop skirts. Now imagine being in muddy Seattle, by the port, running in that skirt. It was restrictive and it's sexist. If you want to, dig deep into it, right? And you pointed out some factors in there that really intersected with our identities, right? Our sort of the life changes that happens, the socialization that happens, right? You were talking about being with a girlfriend of yours, a female friend, but you were also going through puberty. That's bound to happen, right? And now as an adult, as a parent yourself, you have the lens to recognize that you care not to care, but you also care because you are a parent. You are opening up this safe space for your children, for your two boys, to know that you understand and that you care. And if only parents were that way, right? And just to even think about how this topic is really universal, just drop a little, ball there. Planned Parenthood and rights to abortion. My gosh, Texas, right? And then age-appropriate sex education in Florida. We just passed this in Washington State. And so as you can see, society looks at it differently. It's just the way, it's a social problem. And that's why we do things like this in our own respective professions. We do opportunities like this one. We have dialogue with our coworkers so that we continue to have these conversations until they become more universal. It's an unfortunate human nature to want to be nosy, right? But again, so the moral of the story is that this is your self-identity, right? Recognizing that this is how you see yourself and this is how you express yourself. And specific to the expression, it's not so much how people perceive you, but it's how you perceive yourself, right? All right, so moving right along, I'm on a reflection, inhale in and out. All right. So the other piece that's really important, and I hope that you're starting to recognize this, is understanding LGBTQ history and the impact of health on health, right? So understanding LGBTQ health starts with understanding the history of oppression and discrimination that these communities have faced. For example, in part because of bars and clubs were often the only safe places where LGBTQ plus individuals could gather, alcohol and drugs have been an ongoing health disparity and issue that persists to this day. Wanted to highlight some of these images here. The Stonewall Inn is where the first riot happened that became the Pride celebration that we know of today. This happened on the night of June 29th, 1969, that lasted for several days. The Stonewall Inn is very much alive to this day. It's still viable. In fact, during the Obama administration, it was named a historical landmark. The folks that are highlighted here are Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, both trans women of color. Back in the day, they didn't really say trans, but they just referred to themselves as drag queens. But that was because vocabulary within the LGBTQ community was very limited. And often these words were derogatory. For example, the word queer. It's only now that the newer generation, the younger generation, took this word back and empowered themselves, ourselves. And I want to point out Stormy de Larverie, who is often ignored in this history. Stormy de Larverie was a Black trans man and was also there during the Stonewall riots. So the social environmental determinants affecting the health of LGBTQ individuals is truly and largely related to oppression and discrimination. When people say that it's just, oh, it's those people, that people, know that there's a universal theme of oppression and discrimination. And that is why it's important to recognize how racism, sexism can manifest itself within LGBTQ issues, whether that's homophobia, transphobia. And even to this day, even though we recognize that there are now healthcare access points, for trans individuals, for same-sex couples, remember that it's still not quite universal. And there's a distinction between policy and practice, right? There are people who still struggle with employment, with housing, with adopting, with retirement benefits, right? Being LGBTQ+, bullying in schools. This is still a problem, and we need to really safeguard our youth, our young. And oftentimes for many of these kids, they don't have the vocabulary to recognize their identities. And often LGBTQ legislators and LGBTQ policymakers are criticized for putting ideas into children's minds. The thing is, children know who they are. They just don't have the vocabulary. And if we could only create safe space for people, right? And one of the ways that this can happen is opening up, for example, sex education that includes, compassion and understanding of all genders, right? For example, for the longest time, for centuries, medical books, OBGYN topics only showed images of a white baby. Several months ago, there's an artist who finally created, images of other colors, of other races. Because when we don't see ourselves, then we do not exist, right? It's always what other people perceive us to be. Social programs, oftentimes it just stops at this, right? After our time together, what happens next? We have to create social programs to continue on these safe spaces. There's a shortage of healthcare providers. And I hope that after this time, you get to be more knowledgeable, to be more culturally competent in giving care to LGBTQ plus peoples, right? And we recognize that the safe space really needs to be more of it. Safe schools, safe neighborhoods, safe housing in general. Access to recreational facilities. Oftentimes we overlook, like for example, gyms. Often gyms are very segregated between, cisgender male and cisgender females. Where are the non-binary people? Where are the trans folks supposed to go when we know that these are the physical symbols of oppression? Availability of safe meeting spaces, right? Sometimes you might just say, oh yeah, just go to the library. But is it truly a safe space? And then again, access to healthcare services. Hi, baby. LGBT health requires specific attention from healthcare and public health professionals. And folks, I might be preaching to the choir, but just as a reminder, LGBT youth, and the number still keeps the same, static, and it's unfortunate, but LGBT youth are 2 to 3 times more likely to attempt suicide. LGBT youth are more likely to be homeless. Lesbians are less likely to get preventive services for cancer. Gay men are at higher risk of HIV and other STDs, particularly gay men of color. Oftentimes we might say, oh, but there's advertisement. But who are the people that are being, portrayed in these advertisements? Lesbians and bisexual females are more likely to be overweight or obese. Trans individuals have higher prevalence of STDs and HIVs victimization. LGBTQ seniors face additional barriers. I'd like you to encourage you to watch the documentary Gen Silent. The caption is, the people that paved the way for us to come out are going back into the closet to live their last days on earth. Because there are many healthcare services that are not LGBTQ elder or senior competent. Already we've created the stereotype that, oh, grandma and grandpa are having sex. Well, how do you think your mom and dad came to be, right? And then you add, oh, gay grandma, gay grandpa, lesbian grandma, and so we've created that. LGBTQ populations, unfortunately, have the highest rates of tobacco, alcohol, and other drug use. Particularly with tobacco and alcohol, many of these advertisements were geared towards the LGBTQ community. And more alarming trans statistics. In the United States, 1.4 million identify as transgender, but here's the issue. Trans kids and teenagers, and these are the ones that self-identify as such, they experience these incidents. Anti-LGBT violence disproportionately affects trans people, and part of that is how we express ourselves. First, there are cisgender gay men. There are cisgender lesbian women. But by virtue of their cisness, they can navigate through the mainstream cisgender world and not be assumed gay or lesbian. But again, their sexuality, their sexual identity is different from their gender expression. There are, of course, lesbian women who dress more butch. There are gay men who dress more feminine. And so when you go into the gender diversity inclusive of trans people, it becomes double, if not more. This happens all the time. Again, the distinction of policy versus practice. I recognize that in Washington State, we make every effort, Employment Non-Discrimination Act or ENDA, but again, I challenge it with how we practice the policies. We may have LGBTQ affinity groups and many of the outstanding corporations and organizations within our state, from nonprofits to big corporations, but how do they practice them? What are the true safeguards? Now, creating safe space. There are many ways that we, all of us, including LGBTQ people, not just allies, can create this in the workspace. Here's what I have to say about it. When in doubt, ask kindly with compassion. Many LGBTQ folks don't mind that you ask. We prefer that you ask. But yes, absolutely, it can get tiring. It can get tiring. Never assume. And I know I gave you that exercise earlier, right? But the fact is, people do. Now, I recognize that we are in a controlled environment for this training. So I know people were kind of aware and cautious of how they were talking and behaving. But when you are outside of this space, how do we assume people's identities, right? So never assume. This creates labels that are often negative stereotypes, prejudices. Normalize practices such as sharing your pronouns. Whether other people may think that, well, you look feminine, therefore you obviously use she pronouns. Don't go into that rabbit hole, so to speak. Express it, share it, normalize it so that you create safe space for everyone. This is an inclusive practice. If it feels awkward, do something more passive, like an email signature that has your pronouns in it. That's a fun way to do it, right? Zoom, I believe all of us have it now. This is quite amazing. And I think since we've been doing so many of these virtual spaces due to COVID, that we've normalized this practice. Beforehand, it was pretty awkward for folks. Recognize that traditional rules are constantly changing. For example, they pronouns. I still hear people say, but they is a plural pronoun. You can't use that for a single person. Actually, it is now included in the dictionary that it is now acceptable and grammatically correct to use they to refer to one singular person. And when people use English grammar as an excuse, as someone who speaks another language, in my native tongue of the Philippines, our pronouns it's quite simple. The rule is singular and plural. There is no feminine or masculine gender to our pronouns. We either say siya to mean singular or sila to mean plural. So siya is a cis man, a cis woman, a trans woman, a non-binary gender diverse person, individual. And then sila, group of people, 2 or more. And also recognize that, again, and I mentioned this earlier, that different individuals have different meanings. And a young person might be okay with saying queer or referring, you might say queer to them as well, but recognize that it might be trauma-inducing to say that to an older person. So being aware and asking. So I go back to the first sort of thing that I mentioned. When in doubt, ask. And it's quite all right to do your own research, watch films, read books, talk to people, particularly on the trans experience, but remember to double check. What is the intent? What is the motivation of the source? Because we might run into issues where it might be sensationalized, where it's to create drama, or that it's not authentic. Because then we erase the legitimacy of the story of the individual person as an LGBTQ person. So being careful with that. And of course, there's more. Now, cultural considerations. Now, I know our focus is around gender and also sexual identity, but know that these things intersect, right? There's this meme that I see often, being gay doesn't give you the right to be racist. And I love that. And it's a reminder that these things intersect often, if not always. When we talk about gender identity and sexual identity, know that there are cultural considerations around race, around in indigenous peoples. Oftentimes we forget, right? Two-spirit folks, right? When we mention, oh, what's your spirit animal? In indigenous cultures, that's actually a very sacred thing to share. I used to, and I'll confess, and I've stopped doing it now. I used to often say my spirit animal is Oprah Winfrey, and now I've stopped because I thought it was funny and I thought it was true to me. But I now recognize, no, it's actually not good to say that. It's not okay. This is a sacred culture. We have to recognize that when we say people of color, what do we really mean, right? Because when we say Asian and Pacific Islander, there's a difference. And it's only after I moved to the United States that I recognized, oh, they distinguish Asians and Pacific Islanders. It was never in my vocabulary to even mention Pacific Islander. There's a distinction of Southeast Asian culture to South Asian culture to Middle Eastern culture. There's differences between immigrant born and US born or being American born. And when we look at somebody who we perceive to be white, don't assume that they were born here or that they are American, right? And what does it mean to be American? I have my own definitions, and I know you have your own definitions. Languages that are spoken within the family, how you socialize. Is it academic language, right? We have to consider sign language. We have to consider access, language access. And I appreciate the folks at Mental Health Matters for making trainings accessible to all, whether it's Spanish language interpretation or ASL interpretation. Thank you. Thank you so much. We have to talk about religion and spirituality, right? And it's not just, I don't mean just Christianity. I mean all of it. Islam, Buddhism, being non-religious, right? We have to talk about homophobia, particularly internalized homophobia, transphobia, biphobia. Just because we're LGBTQ people doesn't mean that we are immune to this. We really have to be expansive because we are just at the tip of learning and expanding language that is inclusive. Being aware of non-binary folks, queer again, genderqueer. And we have to consider past, present, and future knowledge, storytelling, and histories and legacies. We have to listen to our elders. For many LGBTQ histories, these are not written down. If we're lucky, it might be in academia, but most often it's just sensational. It's often under fiction. We are just now creating literature that is authentic and legitimate, that truly celebrates the LGBTQ experience. We have to think about older adult care, elder care, senior services for LGBTQ people. We're lucky in Washington State, particularly in Seattle, the work of Dr. Karen Fredrickson Goldson at the University of Washington. She pioneered this longitudinal study of LGBTQ care for seniors and elders. And out of this work is born this nonprofit organization called Gen Pride. And we just broke ground last year, the very first LGBTQ senior housing on Broadway. And we hope, and we say this too, that it's not the only one. Might be the first, but we hope that it not be the only one. We truly have to think about access, ADA, visual, auditory, physical, mental, particularly when we know that mental health matters. All right. We don't have a lot of time. My gosh, let me wrap up with sharing some links and resources, and we'll open it up to questions. Just some local resources here, Asian Counseling and Referral Services. They now have an LGBTQ program in there called QVAP, Queer Vision Access Program. Ingersoll Gender Center, the first trans and gender diverse social support program in our state, founded in 1974. Gay City Wellness Center, Gen Pride again, Peer Seattle and Spokane. I know it's crossed off, but I'm so sad to share that Seattle Counseling Service, after 53 years, will be closing its doors on May 6th. But the website is still up if you wanted to see where people are outsourcing their programs and services. Politically, we have the Seattle LGBTQ Commission, which was founded in the early 70s. And this is an official commission within the city of Seattle. And they inform the mayor, the city council, and city departments on anything LGBTQ that impacts Seattle citizens. Utopia Washington is a trans-led organization, particularly Pacific Islanders. And then the very first LGBTQ commission within Washington State was formed a few years back. And just some national resources, CDC, the National Queer Asian Pacific Islander Alliance through encapia.org. And the SAMHSA also has its own LGBTQ equity resource under samhsa.gov/behavioral-health-equity-LGBT. All right, Q&A. And I apologize if I was rushing. I was looking at the time. Want to make sure we had some open space for discussion. And I know that this has been a long 2-hour session with all of you. And I thank you very much for your patience. And while you think of that, I'm going to peek at the chat box and see if there's any questions or comments in here. There's lots of love there to Louisa. Yes, Lola Bernal, acknowledging that, thank you, a lot of ignorance, yes, especially in small communities, it is very challenging. Yes, absolutely, people of color more vulnerable because of lack of family support. And that's why I'm really, personally, I'm just a professional, I'm really happy that despite the pandemic that we have made virtual accessibility for therapy and behavioral health support. And I think this is particularly so critical for people who live in rural areas. And I hope that this continues on as an acceptable form of a therapeutic service, and not just in social work or mental health counseling or substance use, but as expansive as we can make it. We know that there are medical lines, nursing lines through insurance carriers, so I hope that this continues on as well. Jenny was saying, thank you for opening the space. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. Jenny's acknowledging being a POC. Thank you so much. Oh, yes. And Salome was mentioning, now they know the difference between emotional attraction and physical attraction. I'm in the same boat. I didn't used to distinguish that as well myself. And I'm just so proud that the younger generation is really seeing that. And again, part of that is just the social construct of attraction, of sexuality, and that it's just so limiting, and the lack of, and the limited, and if not lack of vocabulary. And now we are defining and redefining theories that we could only think of, and now it's inclusive, and I'm slowly learning to be part of it myself. A personal share here. I used to always just think that I was a gay man until I realized genderqueer was more inclusive of my identity. And so even myself, I'm continuing to recognize and embrace fully who I am, and I continue to grow in the process. Oh yeah, thank you, Sandra. There's a evaluation, and I welcome all of them, and I appreciate in advance your evaluations, because it will help me craft this space and time together better in the future. Thank you. Looking at the time, were there questions? I'll pause for a second here. Live questions.
I have one real quick, because I know we're short in time. And I would like to know if there's any way that I have been always curious about how could I possibly help people, particularly that speak Spanish? Because in our culture, Latin American culture, being gay or being not straight or quote unquote normal it's something that families tend to reject their children. It's very sad. I mean, in all.
Yes, I agree, Luisa. Oh my gosh, I totally agree. Just last week I was having conversation with my colleagues, Entre Hermanos. I will lead you to entrehermanos.org. It's the Washington State's LGBTQ social service organizations for Spanish-speaking LGBTQ people. Their programming is continuing to expand, but they are my go-to resource for this question specifically. I could not agree with you more that there's so many social barriers, and Entre Hermanos is leading this conversation. We recognize also that unfortunately, even with other Spanish language and Latina social service organizations in the area, oftentimes it's lacking in LGBTQ culture competency, right? Because of exactly what you just said. So my resource to you then is Entre Hermanos, which I had on my list. But yeah, I would give them a call, use them as a great resource. I call them my friends in the community. And so I know you will be in great hands with them. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Pablo. Muchas gracias, Pablo. He just put down the website. Thank you, Pablo.
Yeah, I saw it. Thank you.
Salome or Anna? I think that's it, huh? I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I know this was a long time with each other, but I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. And yeah, if you want to reach back out to me, if you had a question that you were maybe too shy to ask, please give me a call, 206-886-2627, or shoot me an email at amcspllc.com, or go through Salome. And I sent Salome a copy of our presentation today. Feel free to use it. But I just caution you not to share, because it loses context without the actual live presentation, but feel free to connect with me in this manner. Thank you so very much. Salamat po, everyone. Thank you, Salome. It's so good to see you and your baby. Thank you so much for sharing your love.
Thank you. She just woke up from her nap, so I appreciate everyone's patience. Gentle reminder that the evaluation form is in the chat box. We'll also be emailing that out. And then if you're interested in attending any of our future roundtables, two of them are also posted into the chat box. Our mindfulness event and the intersectionality of trauma and addiction. So those two events are coming up. And if you would like to partner with us, please feel free to reach out. I'll be sending all that information in an email as well as the recording link. Thank you so much, and I hope everyone will have a great rest of their night. Bye.